Welcome to Waka Phambili, the building of a Wharram Tiki 38 catamaran. In this video we'll look at how we go about building our engine boxes. We found the easiest way to assemble the boxes was to put them together in several different pieces and then assemble those pieces together. Once all the panel pieces were glued together, that had cured, and then those inner corners all sanded off, we were able to get going on those fillets. These holes will become attachment points and they'll need to be filled with thickened epoxy and then re-drilled. So we're just blocking off the bottom with a piece of wood that's been taped with ordinary packaging tape. It doesn't stick to the epoxy. There's another little nook and cranny that we'll fill up. It'll drop off there into there.
There's an engine box that's been put together, so we're having our first trial run of seeing how that's going to fit between the beams. Grant's managed to walk it out. And there he waits, drinking his tea, waiting for me to come and help. Now we have the box suspended between the two beams. The length of the boxes, how much? 1 point? That's the space between the two. Milo coming to be part of the whole scene.
After some YouTubing, we'd come across this really neat square drilling guide that came in really handy here. It's a test. Pin those edges up, give them a bit of a bevel. In the meantime, we started work on the engine sleds. Here we were trying out a new attachment for the angle grinder which had arrived in the mail. It's effectively a disc with a chainsaw blade on the periphery of it, and it, it removes material at a deadly rate. But we'd had to change our transom design slightly. We'd noticed that guys who'd been using the automatic or rather electric trim and tilt mechanisms on the 9.9 Yamahas have a much larger bracket, a mounting bracket, and that bracket, if it's exposed or put onto the existing plan transom, exposes the power tilt trim motor into the water flow and the bottom of the bracket as well. So guys have come up with all sorts of plans to kind of modify the existing engine sleds to get these out of the flow. One of them is a deflector that we've seen, and we've noticed that on Lucky Fish they ended up doing a similar sort of thing to this as well. So we incorporated that extra extension into the total shape of our engine sleds, and that explains why we have a much deeper transom. Of course, any change in dimension means that there'll be a knock-on effect, and all sorts of other lengths and angles had changed too. Right, to get that angle there. That's better. Cool.
Work up a sweat.
And then there were two. After toing and froing with the agent and also the information on the internet, we eventually determined an exact bracket dimension that we could make use of, and also found out that there were a few hole options, so we decided to be sure that we could cover all of them. Always cut a slight taper, because the edge of the hole pushes it inwards. And you've got to take it out with a rasp. We chamfer off the top and bottom edges of the slotted holes just so the epoxy casting flares and the plug can't be pulled out. Barrier coating brings a beautiful deep gloss and brings out the grain. It almost makes the fiberglass below disappear completely. It's absolutely beautiful. There's a scuff up on the wire wheel, just so that they glue easily. Sufficiently abraded surface, rough as anything. So we've just managed to keep a bit of glue in. We're going to need to go and just clean out using a dribble. Do these spots just to get this in. That's a millimetre too small. What we finally decided on doing for these bushes was to use a piece of a poly pipe that went into the hole in the lugs, and then on the inside of that was a piece of ordinary PVC conduit. So that's a friction fit into the poly pipe. You saw me knocking them in a bit earlier. And then the stainless steel rod that goes through the PVC is a nice sliding fit into the PVC, so we should have a little bit of vibration dampening at each of these junctions. So the 16mm stainless bar goes through the forward end of the sled, which is where we're working on now. It goes through both forward and aft ends of the junction between the engine boxes and the beams as well.
You want to hit it back? You want to hit it this side back?
No. Whenever we popped in a pair of bushes like this, we would slide the stainless round bar through both bushes just to make sure that they set up in alignment. We obviously had to lube up the stainless with a bit of wax polish first to make sure that once the epoxy had set up, nothing would stick. And that's the plan. So here we're about to make a start on mounting all the hardware on the inside of the engine boxes that raise and lower the sled. So yeah, this took a little bit of figuring out. Yep, you guessed it. A whole heap more of drill, fill and drill. Hi Kaz.
dry run of the pulley mechanism that's going to hold the engine sled.
Those lengths, and then look like that.
Oh, that looks neat.
Yeah, and more importantly, you're not going to knock yourself on it, and you'll be able to get a socket in there. I'm hoping. And the sled, these will go into the sleds. There's been quite some deliberation as to how to sort out these lines that lift and lower the engine sled. So we've kind of just mocked it up with some loose string. Look at that!
Jeez!
I knew she'd be impressed, but truth be told, the inspiration for this simple solution comes from Dan Hardwick's Lucky Fish. So thank you very much to Stuart Coates for sharing all those wonderful videos on Lucky Fish Gets Away. This is where the credit belongs. And same thing again. Okay, so what we've got here, if you look really, really carefully at an angle in the light, you can probably see my fingers tracing lines. Looks like it's a dusting of sanding dust. It's actually very waxy, almost sticky amine blush, which comes through onto the surface of a freshly laid layer of resin. If the temperature is less than 16 degrees, particularly if it's decreasing, and also if the humidity is high, and so we've had a bit of rain and what have you about, and the trick to it is to take a Scotch-Brite scouring pad and hot water only, without any solvents or anything like that, and you give it a good old scrubbing. I've done a test patch just an hour or so earlier to the right here. You can see where the waxy amine blush is on the surface here with the water trickling off it, and where the sort of chalkier appearances where I've scrubbed it off, that is dry and slightly scuffed from the scourer, so quite happy about that. We're going to need to scuff it before we put primer on anyway. So they say not to use any acetone or anything like that, because it may embed the amine blush into the resin, which you obviously don't want, because no primers or anything will stick to it. Using these tape drip edges is a great way of stopping excess epoxy resin from running down onto areas that have already been sanded. After all the components had been resin coated, we had to do the final bit of prep to get them ready for priming, which meant drilling these last few holes through the layer of glass that had gone over the holes, over the drill full drill, and then we sanded every component with 120 grits. Remember at this stage that every single component or every part of this boat that is exposed to the weather or the seawater is actually laminated with 200 grams per square meter of woven cloth, and that has to be sanded in preparation for a barrier coat, and then sanded again in preparation for painting. We keep a very careful eye out for any imperfections as we go. We may have burnt through the glass with a bit of sandpaper, or we've put the resin on a bit light, or something's not quite right. Any of these spots are marked with a red marker and then attended to. Before painting each time, we have a massive clean up and try and eliminate as much of the dust as we possibly can, just to try and get the best quality finish that we can possibly. Here we are masking out the margins of the lids for the white area. So this is going to be where the Kiwi Grip anti-slip goes, and we need to put that onto a braided epoxy and not over the paint. And so we will have to repeat this whole process once that little margin of white has gone onto these lids and we put the Kiwi Grip on. And finally, the first layer of top coat. So what is it? This stuff is amazing. We've worked out how to get the proportions just right. We've also worked out how to make sure that the hardener doesn't crystallize and oxidize, so we keep it in a separate container. The light stipple that you see here will soon disappear as it off gases and sets out absolutely flat, smooth, and hardens up. The first coat here is dry enough to overcoat, but we thought we'd give it a try and see if we can flat it off with a bit of water paper and just see what the second coat would come up with as a show surface, so it should make it worthwhile. Right, we're working with this outside corner here. Watch the surface tension there. All we're trying to do is just break that surface so that that surface tension is no longer there. And once that's gone, the water will stick to that surface instead of just running off it. And that's enough. That's enough of a key for the next coat. That's the mark that I'm looking for anyway. Right, so as you can see in the background here, we've got the engine blocks kind of set up. It's mocked up. We're busy painting it at the moment, so yeah, we've just kind of mocked it up primarily to take this measurement here and just make sure that things are right. This is the gap that you've apparently got to be wary of waves washing up against and a lot of spray heading onto your motor through this gap. So we've seen in a couple of places what guys have done, and that's to screw and bits of rubber and what have you over there. And we thought that our take on that would be slightly different, although same principle really. And that we'd use this PVC canvas and these sort of caravan awning sliders, and we'll pop them in. So we've got it all marked off, and so just as a quick dry mock up, checking to see that things actually fit and line up properly. I've got these holes that have been drilled, filled and re-drilled. They'll take a 316 self-tapping screw. Yeah, they're 12 mils long, which leaves the point shy of the other end by the thickness of that aluminium. Let's just lift that and see how much slack it gives us when it's deployed. Put your finger in there, Woody, just so the camera can see. I can't see.
Not much has changed.
That's good. Nice. Very good. Good morning. Just peeled the tape. Should have taken a bit of the tape coming off. It's always pretty cool. Today we're going to put on the Kiwi grip. It'll look good. It'll look good once it's all dressed up with its lifting tackle and stuff. Slowly getting there with the starboard side waiting in the wings. So you shouldn't really mix it, so I'll just give it a bit of a gentle, get that stuff in. Yeah, it doesn't really look so it's...
It doesn't need a mix.
No.
Yeah, much better here where it's thicker. It's not going up there at all.
So needing more there. I think we're good. So we'll lose some of that as it slumps a bit.
nice and neat that looks. Here we're working with the hinges. Looks really neat when it's done like this. But our big issue is tying them off underneath so that we have both knots at one end so we don't have them getting in the way. Both hidden as much as we possibly can. So Grant's come up with a plan.
Oh, we don't know yet.
That we're trialing.
These plans went through many different iterations until we eventually decided on a much more radical approach.
Then we've now drilled a hole which we filled, and we will then drill another hole through, a small hole enough, just big enough for the twine, and then we'll come through and it will thread this one here, and it will made it so that we'll have 2 inside knots, which is exactly what we want, just by drilling these holes here. Bit hard saw having to drill through the white paint, but it's been done and it can be healed. On the other end, we are needing to find a way to tie a knot. So what we've done, the first knot will be on the other lid, and then the second knot will be here. And what we're going to do is glue in a straw, then create a mold that will go over the top here, so that we can thread the cord through and tie a knot on the other end.
I'll just bed that in there. And then this whole thing, we'll just sort of shape it with a Dremel, I think, around these edges just to make it look neat. We mocked it all up. We measured, cut our line, and then... Feels very short, eh?
It's short.
By miles.
So how did we measure?
No idea. Ah, there's that first. Actually, it's quite neat.
Very neat.
Yeah, it doesn't
Nice and
feel.
firm.
Yeah, plenty firm enough. That tomorrow.
Let's worry about that tomorrow. Otherwise we're going to be chasing this rain.
Oh! At around this time we set everything up on our beams and had a bit of a show and tell, invited a few friends around that were interested to see what we were doing. So you'll see that the engine box had been set up, the one on the port side has got its sled in, and we'd mocked up using these sticks the shape of the hull roughly, so it's only from the mast beam forwards. But yeah, that's how she looks, and we're pretty chuffed with our progress to date. And from Te Waka Phambili, we say thank you for following along. Tala Gatle.